Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together and talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me today we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Good. How are you doing, Trevor?
I'm doing all right. It's been a nice kind of chill, relaxing weekend here. Yeah, it's been kind of nice and peaceful. I mentioned before we started recording, I basically spent the weekend playing Fortnite and tell me why. Just like falling back into Fortnite and almost immediately like remembering how and why Fortnite led me to break one of my Joy-Con controllers on my Switch very early on, because that
Mm.
game can be very frustrating. But then tell me why it was like a nice, chill, kind of like peaceful kind of thing to balance it off. But we're not going to talk about that today. Today is all about our Miles Morales spoiler cast, Spider-Man Miles Morales spoiler cast. So this is one of the first games I played on the PS5 when that came out. You've played through it on the PS4,
hmm
so we'll maybe even be able to compare and contrast a little bit of our experiences on that front. But we'll dive into that. We're going to do our kind of spoiler-free impressions up front, and then I'll have hopefully a time code in the description for like, hey, here's when we're diving into spoiler chat territory. If you only want to hear kind of our spoiler-free thoughts, otherwise you can bounce away after that, all that stuff. But before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you are feeling extra generous, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful Patreon producers and all that stuff. Trying to think if there's any other housekeeping. I guess on YouTube, you can go check out our kind of ongoing Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right now, we're uploading Let's Plays. Right now, you have my retro gaming Let's Plays that you can go check out of me playing through NES Classic games. And then also for at least the next few weeks, I'm uploading kind of some of my Demon Souls playthrough that I did on Twitch a few weeks or a couple weeks back. So you can check out kind of those breakouts over there on our YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. So yeah, that'll do it for kind of housekeeping. Let's dive right on into Spider-Man Miles Morales. Spoiler-free thoughts first. What did you think about this game there, Frank?
I think it's great. Even from playing it on PS4 and I was playing it on the Pro specifically, like I still think it's a great game and a ton of fun. And I mean, I also was a huge fan of the 2018 Spider-Man game and honestly just Spider-Man in general.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think it's a fantastic game and I think I still love the Insomniac little universe they've built there.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing that like continued forward a little bit in this kind of like a 1.5 before we get like a Spider-Man 2. So like I'll take any chance I can get to get back into that universe and swing around. So I mean, but this in particular I do think was like a really strong outing for Spider-Man.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. For those that did not sit through our 4-hour epic like PlayStation bracket breakdown, Spider-Man 2018 ended up being our kind of overall winner of that series, and in large part to RNGesus and stuff kind of coming in and breaking some of our ties. But I think we all kind of like at the end of the day were like, that's a perfectly like acceptable selection of the games of this last generation. And yeah, I loved hopping back into kind of that feel, and diving into Miles Morales. For me in particular, like playing it on the next gen, it was. I kind of went into my PS5 knowing that I was going to play through Astro's Playroom first, and then it was going to be all about Spider-Man Miles Morales. And I loved that I knocked both of those things out in a couple days, kind of right at the launch there, because it was manageable, and it is Spider-Man 1.5, as you kind of touched on, especially after I went through and played this game. I went back and played the Spider-Man remastered, and it is immediately apparent when you just look at like the map and all of the different like check boxes that you're gonna have to find on the map that, oh yeah, like Miles Morales is definitely a more digestible experience, compared to 2018, which I really appreciated for what I was looking for right now. I thought getting to see more of Miles' story, especially in the time since we got the 2018 Spider-Man, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse came out, and
Mhm.
certainly like has shot up to the top of my favorite movies lists. And just getting to understand and know that character better, as opposed to like on the periphery, I kind of knew that there was a new Spider-Man out there, but getting to see Miles' story, yeah, I love the different version that we're getting with Insomniac. There are definitely elements of this game that definitely feel like their version of Into the Spider Verse. Obviously, the big tagline is be great or be yourself for the game, which very much feels like their version of anyone can wear the mask. But I love that the Insomniac version of Spider-Man is letting these characters kind of coexist in a way that the seemingly the comics as well as the movie are kind of built around the idea that there's only going to be one Spider-Man in a given universe. Obviously, Into the Spider-Verse is going to be all about bringing them all together again, but it's still like the fact that we get two Spider-Man in this game is really fun, and I really had a good time with it. So yeah, it. I think we both have the platinum. Took me 12 to 15 hours to do that, and admittedly, like part of the platinum is a second run of the game, and I just kind of like plowed through my second run in a I want to say I was able to do that in like 4 hours, just mainlining the game with all powers unlocked and everything like that, and not having to worry about side quests and all that stuff. But yeah, I had such a great time getting back into the action of the like open world games that I've played this year. It's probably a toss up between that and Ghost of Tsushima for my favorite. Valhalla is very, very big, but like way too big. Valhalla is like 5 Spider-Man Miles Moraleses, if not more. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time with it, and so much so that like the next game I played after Miles Morales was Bug Snacks, and then I was like, you know what, I really want to just keep going back to like that Spider-Man action, and so that was what led me to boot up the remastered and just play through that whole game and get the platinum on that one too. So, and that was before they allowed the like save transfer over to the PS5, where you could just basically like upload your save and then all the trophies pop. I got I fully replayed the game and got the platinum again on PS5 and had a great time with it. So, yeah, and even going back and like replaying that with the context of Miles Morales had another like few fun little elements in there. Like any moment you got to kind of play as Miles in the first game. Like it obviously you feel super underpowered in 2018 Spider-Man because you haven't been bitten by a spider yet. So it's like stealth sections and stuff like that. And so getting to see go from that to how he's grown in Spider-Man Miles Morales here was a ton of fun. So I think that can maybe do it for our spoiler-free impressions, unless you have anything else you want to touch on or add, Frank, and then we'll dive full blown into spoiler territory. Anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much it for me, spoiler free wise.
Okay. Cool. Then yeah, let's dive in. Starting out, one of the this isn't like admittedly too spoilery, but did you have any favorite Spidey suits here in the new game? Obviously, that's one of the great little flourishes that Insomniac has been putting into these games is just the number of collectible suits that you can get. Were there any that really jumped out at you?
Yeah, there's a couple I actually really liked. The one I used, I think probably the most was the 2099 suit, like their version of like what his like future suit would look like. It's the one that has like the hood with like the glowing eyes.
Okay.
And it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that navy blue with like the red and the white. I really like that suit a lot. I used it like probably most of the game. Um, I also did. I appreciate they put the Spider Verse suit in there, like with all the Spider Verse like effects and everything. I appreciate that's there, so I definitely want to give a shout out to that one too.
Yeah.
Um, and then I really like the sort of I can't remember the name for this one. I think it's the 2020 suit, but it's basically it reminds me of like Daft Punk. It's like
Yeah.
the Daft Punk helmet with like the headphones,
Yeah, that was
and
absolutely
like
the one
the
that I really like gravitated towards was the Spider-Man 2020 suit. Yeah.
that was like my new game plus suit. Like I had like after I got unlocked all my suits, like that was the one I think I played through like new game plus on. and it was just like that is like I think also like a super Miles suit. Like I think that's like super fitting, and like I really like the design and like the jacket and everything.
Yeah.
The only other one I would give a shout out to too is I love that they gave him a suit that's the Prowler design,
Yeah.
like the Prowler colors.
Hmm.
Like I haven't, no one's ever like I haven't seen that before, so I thought that was like awesome.
Yeah, that was there was like even a little tease that like he was maybe looking at those colors like in that montage of
Mhm.
him and Genki designing the suit. Like you see like green and purple, and it's like, oh, those are Prowler colors. What's that about? And so yeah, to ultimately see that kind of suit paid off was fun. Yeah, I certainly I immediately since it was I think at least in the PS5 version I think it was like unlocked from the get go was the Into the Spider-Verse suit, so I immediately jumped into that one given my love of that game, and like I absolutely like I had a great time using that suit and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, once some of the other options started opening up, I was like, oh, this Miles Morales 2020 suit, which you get for I think unlocking all of the doing all the training challenges stuff.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it was a ton of fun, like having the the as you said the Daft Punk kind of helmet. And then one of the other little flourishes of it that I appreciate is he's wearing headphones, like Beats by Dre type headphones, but they say Miles on them, but like it's Miles with a 3 instead of the E kind of thing. And I was like,
Mhm.
I mean, that seems like a kind of a dead giveaway about who you might be if you're,
Yeah.
but that's one of the things I have thought about in every incarnation that I've seen so far of this is in Spider-Verse, everybody is constantly screaming Miles at him. So it's like, you guys are really not like, and admittedly, he's saying Peter all the time too. So, they're not so concerned about secret identities, but in this too, kind of felt there was an element of that, especially in the beginning sequence where you have Peter and Miles kind of like teaming up there. And then just, yeah, yelling each other's names at one another. Um, I also just for like the sentimentality of it, I really enjoyed like the little winter suit, which is just
Mhm.
the main suit you get throughout the game, but with that like the scarf that the deaf girl kind of gives you after doing some of one of her side quests kind of things. That was just a
Mhm.
nice little like a nice little like I when she gave that to me, I was like, I'm gonna honor that gift and I'm gonna wear this suit for a little while. And that was also
Yeah.
one of the things I loved was how the different suits were animated and designed to be used in any of the cutscenes.
Mhm.
And this was one of the rare exceptions where like it did take whatever suit I was wearing and it like put me back into that main suit, and I was like, why did it do that? And then it becomes clear at the end of that mission when it's like, oh, it's so that they could just add the scarf to it and kind of give you that new design that wasn't going to work with your Daft Punk goggles. And then I also want to give some love to the Uptown Pride suit, mainly
Mhm.
for how that one gets introduced. That's the one you get for doing all of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app activity things, and you do that one, and basically like screen goes to black, and then it comes back up on the big Black Lives Matter mural with you in this new gold and black suit. Which I thought was just really cool. And it's like of the images I've seen like reshared online, that Black Lives Matter mural is the one that just always comes up. And it's admittedly like one that I immediately like clicked like screen grab on. Yeah, like just, I mean, they all have like a great sense of style to them. I also really, really love how the first suit that Peter gives you like is
Mhm.
clearly not designed for you, and so it's like saggy in some places and like it's all wrinkled and like and it just it doesn't fit right. So
Yeah.
I loved like I was like, I really hope I'm not in this suit for long because like it just looks bad compared to like the
Yeah.
style that you want Miles to have. But I appreciated that like it was realistic and it was true to these characters. Peter is just giving him one of his hand down suits. It even has like the the very old school like 60s animated Spider-Man like logo on the back of it. The Great Responsibility suit is the one that's called. So yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, like all of them, I think are like I'm scrolling through the wiki guide on IGN that has like screen grabs of all of them, and I think they all like really shout out. I also in the 2018 game, I really loved the going around in the animated suit,
Mhm.
and I loved that there was a comparable animated suit in this one too, especially since I had watched the animated the new Spider-Man animated series to see kind of like the introduction of Miles's arc in that one, right when I like started watching or playing this game. So yeah, those are I think some of our favorite
And
suits. Any others you want to give some love to or shout outs to?
yeah, and of course the shout out to a Bodega Cat,
Yeah,
the Bodega Cat suit.
of
That
course.
I wore that for a little bit too, because I do like the design, and that's another one that like kind of to one of the points you said earlier too, like it really fits in the world. Like, and I like using the suits that really like fit in with everything and like are even realistic of like how he would get it. And it is like, cause it's just his suit with like a sweater and a backpack and like with the cat. And like, I love all that.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, it's, Spider Cat, Spider Man, the cat, is
Yeah.
great. Especially, yeah, so you get introduced to him like early on in the game. You go out and save him, and then I did like his suit or that suit you can't get until after you beat the main game, and then there's like a side mission attached to it. And I remember seeing it like there in the like suits menu, pretty much the whole game. I was like, they knew everybody was going to want that suit. So I applaud them for like making that the carrot at the end of the stick to kind of chase after. And then yeah, especially you can see this in any of the trailers that kind of like introduced Spider Cat. But the fact that like he like whacks enemies with his paw in like finisher combos is a great little like flourish, and he's wearing the Spider-Man mask. So yeah, as soon as I got that one, I wore that for a little while and kind of just enjoyed that for a good chunk of that was probably one of my New Game Plus suits.
Mhm.
Was enjoying that one. Yeah.
Oh, and to your other point there, of like when the moment where Peter gives you the suit and then you change it to it like in the park, I thought it was really funny in New Game Plus because like I was wearing like the Daft Punk suit already,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh man, it's gonna take me out of this Daft Punk suit and put me in this like shitty suit that doesn't fit well, and then he doesn't. Like you just stay in whatever suit you were wearing the whole time.
Yeah.
But I was like, I thought that was gonna be a super comical moment.
Hmm.
That was like gonna be perfect where you come out behind the thing and just like this bad suit again,
Yeah.
and I have like the Daft Punk helmet that's like animated already.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was I started to head down that path, but when I was mentioning, I love that like the suits are animated to be worn in a lot of those different cutscenes, especially because a lot of the cutscenes have him kind of lifting up the mask or maybe lifting up only part of the mask, and I love that like the Daft Punk one, which is just like a helmet, so it's not like fabric that he can like lift partially up. It is like it's animated differently in that like he lifts up half of the mask kind of thing, and then like brings the whole thing back down. So yeah, I loved that like they they kind of accommodated for those different choices that players might be making in the game, compared to like going back to remastered and stuff like there's the Fantastic Four suit where there's like just a paper bag like that doesn't animate well in any of those scenes. So like it doesn't really work for that game. But I appreciated that they seem to put the extra effort into to Miles Morales here. So moving away from some of our favorite suits, what did you think of kind of the characters of this one? Obviously, the kind of the central and primary antagonist here is Finn Mason, who for fans of the comics probably already caught and knew as the Tinkerer. Because Phineas Mason is historically that character in the comics, and even in the MCU movie, it was the brother from Orange Is the New Black is all I remembered. But so like I didn't catch the name thing there when she gets introduced, and it wasn't until like after the fact that I pieced it together. But I did. I remember like when she's there with like the family dinner kind of thing with Miles and his mom and Genki. I did remember at that moment thinking, like, oh man, I wish they hadn't revealed that the Tinkerer was female in the trailers because I
Yeah.
immediately in that scene was like, oh, she's the Tinkerer. Okay. But then we've talked about this a little bit prior to recording any of this stuff. I appreciated that, like, that reveal isn't held out, it isn't prolonged, it isn't like, oh, like, I know that that's going to be who the Tinkerer is, but Miles isn't going to know for another 4 hours or something like that. It's like, no, she like he finds out pretty early on that like she's, the person he's fighting out there, in that kind of like reveal on the bridge scene. And so there isn't like much of a gap there. But I found myself appreciating that, like, oh, okay, it didn't really matter that it was spoiled for me a little bit by the trailers. But it was one of those things that, like, if you knew the character name, it was spoiled as soon as she like said, like, oh yeah, her name's Finn. So what did you think of Finn in this incarnation? Oh, and I lost you right in time to ask you that question. We need to check on Frank's internet because he seems to drop out pretty frequently on these calls. You back with me, Frank? I see you're.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
no problem. I was just joking that we need to like check your internet, get you hooked up with like better internet there in Austin. What did you think of kind of Finn and the relationship there between Miles and Finn?
I really liked it. One of the things I think I mentioned when we were sort of talking offline about Spider-Man was that like I like Insomniac's version of Finn and the Tinkerer more than just like the normal version of the Tinkerer.
Yep.
Like I like that it has like there is like a more personal backstory there. There is like a connection with not only Miles, but just like there's just more there than just like this is a guy that like worked on tech for them like all these bad guys in the military and whoever. And like I just really like again, like I really like their universe. I like what they're doing with some of the characters that I've already known and I've already seen in like comics and movies and stuff. And I really like I think their take on the Tinker is like some of the best stuff they've really done in this universe in terms of like reinventing a character.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I love and as you said, like when we originally talked offline about the game, the like all of Spider-Man's best villains are those that have like that personal connection with Peter, and it's not just like the Spider-Man and Doc Ock fight. It is Peter and Otto. The relationship that they have really helps fuel the dynamic there. And so having Miles and Finn have a history, having been best friends, potential romantic love interest kind of thing in there over the years, was I think a great way to fold that character that otherwise could have been, a throwaway, C-list villain kind of thing. But it really elevated her, and gave those extra stakes to Miles, especially, I forget his name, but the director on this one, I know in the Spoilercast he did with Kind of Funny, he kind of talked about the idea that, Miles doesn't have a great deep bench yet of villains to himself. So Insomniac being able to kind of like take ownership of the Tinkerer, one of Peter's lesser known kind of throwaway villains, and try and really bring that extra tie into to it, I think really elevated things. And I thought so it was bold of them then to kill her off at the end of the game. Because especially going back and replaying Spider-Man, I was like, where did we leave Otto? Like, I remember the fight on the thing. Where is he? Oh, he just ends up kind of like incarcerated and he's in jail. Spoilers for 2018 Spider-Man, I guess too. So I kind of went into this game expecting that same kind of thing. Like, oh, whatever happens, she's going to be rehabilitated, but then like pretty quickly it's like, okay, she's doing like way too much bad stuff, so she's not going to be like free by the end of this game. But for them to just completely kill her off, giving her like a little redemption, saving Miles kind of in those final moments, I thought was a bold and interesting choice, and now is going to leave Miles, like going back, making that kind of comparison to Spider-Verse. In Gwen's scene, she's kind of introduced as like she in her universe, Peter, she gets bit. Peter turns into the lizard, and she tries to like save him but fails, and Peter dies in that universe, as the lizard. And she kind of has that whole thing of like, so now I close myself off, and I'm curious if Miles is going to have a similar reaction. Like his best friend, for like his childhood, is dead, certainly because of decisions she made, but also because like he wasn't able to save her. They weren't able to connect and talk it out, basically. And that's going to sit with him. That is almost his Uncle Ben, kind of character in his kind of continuity now, and I think that's an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how he deals with that. Like, I mean, going back to 2018, like Peter doesn't have Aunt May or Uncle Ben now, and now Miles doesn't have his dad. So I guess his dad was probably his Uncle Ben, really, from the first game. But like, yeah, they both have felt loss, and I think that's kind of a shared bond that they will have maybe in the next game. What did you think of the incorporation of the Prowler in this one?
I love that too. It kind of caught me off guard at first because like that the Prowler is such a central character to Miles and like his universe, and I just going in, I just never thought about the Prowler though. I didn't think like, yeah, he's going to show up, he'll be here. But as soon as he's like, hey, we got this message or this thing on the Spider-Man app, it's from Aaron Davis. I was like, oh shit! Like I was immediately like, oh man, and he's like, that's my uncle, and he goes, does the whole thing with him, and I love that like the uncle he just knows
Yeah.
from like right out the get, and that's why he even probably put the message in the first place, or I assume. But then that's why like I guess well maybe because he was looking for normal Spider-Man, right?
Well, he puts the thing in the app, and he kind of he mentions like, yeah, he obviously by the end of that he knows it's Miles and puts Miles's name on the card, and that was a great like way of revealing on the what Metro card or whatever. But he kind of like says like, you know, I thought I recognized some of those moves, like seeing them on TV, but I feel like he didn't quite know. Like I don't think he knew it was Miles until Miles showed up and they interacted, and like, yeah, you like it's one of those things like you're of course you're gonna understand and recognize that that's your nephew. Like just like at the end of Spider-Verse, like when Miles and Jefferson Davis like talk, it's like I feel like Jefferson has to know that that's his son because of like how they act. And yeah, he's putting on a voice, and they play with that a little bit here too, where he tries to put on his Spider-Man voice or whatever. But yeah, I also loved that like he immediately sees through that. And obviously we don't, or like Miles doesn't know that the Prowler is his uncle until, you know, a little bit later. But that's another reveal that like they could have, you know, kept a little bit more suspenseful, but they really kind of dispatched with that pretty quickly. And I liked the team up element of Prowler and Spider-Man here. You know, Prowler kind of coming out of like he had retired after Jefferson died in the first game, but you know he sees like his nephew getting into trouble. He's like, I gotta step in and help out. I've done some work with Roxxon. I know kind of the shady stuff that these guys are into. And I need to make sure that Miles doesn't, you know, try and be a hero like his dad was, because I can't lose him too. So I love that like there was that relationship between the two, and obviously like he and Miles don't see eye to eye on how they approach all that stuff, but I appreciate that like he was coming from a good place, and certainly you know the fact that he shows up near the end to try and help and save Harlem and stuff like that. And get people out and all that is another element. And certainly, again, like he even, you know, gives up his freedom to kind of like rat out on Simon. I don't remember the guy's name. But Krieger. Yeah, there you go. I was like, Simon Kinberg. I'm like, no, that's the guy who has screwed up the Last Stand or the Dark Phoenix like storyline twice in X-Men. Simon Krieger, who I did not like as soon as he comes in, it's like, oh, Troy Baker's in this game. Okay.
Yeah. I was like, hey, Troy.
Yeah. And that was another, like, I don't know that character, and I don't really know Roxxon all that well outside of like Iron Man 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're like an old Iron Man villain.
Yeah,
like they've been around for like forever. I barely know much about them. I just know like the name, and I associate them with like Iron Man. But it's cool that again, it's like it's a universe.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, yeah, so like they're very clearly like a you know, take on Exxon, you know, big basically oil energy kind of company. So it's like, of course they're going to be up to some sinister stuff. I don't, and I haven't looked him up, so I don't really know too much if Simon Krieger turns into like a, you know, another character or another bad guy. But I appreciate that at least for the sake of this game, he was just kind of like businessman being a dicky businessman behind the scenes. Yeah. Even in that final fight, he kind of like phones in just to be like, it doesn't really matter like who of you two wins because even if this whole thing blows, like we're gonna make out like bandits. So have fun, kids. Do
Yeah.
your thing. And he's just kind of like this absentee villain. It's
Mm.
have you played Far Cry 4?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I saw somebody else kind of like share this as well, but like he very much has like Pagan Min kind of vibes to him in this,
Mm.
where he's just kind of like he's largely absent from the story. Like he pops in a little bit here and there, but he is just kind of like he is pulling the evil strings behind the curtain while the Tinker kind of very much kind of takes the showmanship of the big bad villain for this game. So I appreciated that kind of that just yeah it was fun to see Troy pop up in that, especially because again going to the Spider-Man episodes that I had watched prior to this, he popped up as Kraven the Hunter in one of those episodes, and I didn't even like realize it was him because Kraven the Hunter has some kind of like Eastern European accent or something like that. And so I was like, it wasn't until I was doing that D Plus show episode on it that I saw it, and I was like, oh, that was Troy. Okay, cool. And then like even doing that, I didn't look in Troy's credits to see that he was in Spider-Man Miles Morales. So yeah, it was just fun having him pop up too. But yeah,
I
yeah.
really I really liked him in this game. And of course, I mean like it's Troy Baker, like, and I mean I know like I'm sure you're a fan too, like he's great and everything, but I mean like I really liked like him in this game and the way he portrays that character. And I loved listening to like the audio logs of like I like you can get to hear like when he's going through the roster of like who can they call to like
Hmm.
tail and like Spider-Man, and he's like Black Cat, no, she's off the grid, and like whoever, no, and then he's like, wait, who's the guy who wears purple?
Yeah,
I love he has to go through this list of like costumed people and their names.
yeah,
And then like you pointed out too, I love the yeah, at the end when he's just like harassing you over like the call on the loudspeaker and talking about how great their insurance is, and they're gonna make money off of this building blowing up. And if anything, he's like he's talking about how like if they blow up all of Harlem, he's like, we're gonna have a whole Roxxon City now, like it's not even gonna be Roxxon Plaza.
yeah. It's like
I'm
it's
just like
almost
he's like
Arkham
using
City
it as an
basically.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I would that would be a funny thing that they could even try to steer into for like a future game too, like with Roxxon like trying to take over. I know obviously it didn't get ultimately all destroyed, but there's still a lot of stuff that got messed up.
Yeah, and
Um,
like definitely given the ending of him getting locked away, I imagine Roxxon's probably gonna take a stock hit from that. Um, but he's also it's I love he is also ingrained in my mind now because listening to one of those audio log things was the first time I really played around with the 3D audio of the
mm,
Pulse 3D audio headsets, because I was wearing that and like I was listening to like I push the prompt or whatever and he starts talking from a TV monitor or something over here, and so I hear it out of this ear and then I like just spin the camera around and hear the audio spin around in my head, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool effect. So his voice will always be ingrained in my mind as like 3D audio as well. Um, yeah, and then what did you think of as kind of Rhino being one of the big bosses of this game as well?
that's another thing I loved. Like, I know, I guess I keep saying that every time, but it's like that's another thing I really, really like too, because like I love the just immediately in the beginning, the fight with him is like I think like a highlight of the game too, like that intro with just Peter and him, and then Peter gets sort of taken out, and then he even tells Miles just to get out of there, but Miles like just doesn't back down, and then just ends up being able to take down the Rhino. And I love that, and I love how he just kind of comes back later, because of course when like Roxxon's like, yeah, we'll watch him until the cops get here, and then Peter and him are like, okay, and then just leave. And I was like, oh my god, like why,
I
why, like,
I honestly didn't even think like I I knew that clearly Troy, because yeah, Troy gets introduced in that scene as well, and I was like, okay, you're clearly like sleazy, evil, corporate bad guy.
mm,
But I didn't. I like when Rhino comes back later in the game. I was like, oh, that is a good pull because I did not think about that at the beginning there. I thought like, oh yeah, like Rhino's knocked out, whatever. These Roxxon guys like are being pretty chill about their whole like building having just been like demolished by this fight. But whatever, like they're going to be the bad guy here and there in a little way. But yeah, Rhino coming back with kind of the extra armor plating stuff that they put on, I thought was a great touch. And I honestly like this is another thing I didn't piece together until hearing kind of the creative director talk about it on kind of funny Spoilercast. But the idea that like Rhino was the big bad Sinister Six guy that Miles faced off against in Spider-Man 2018 was a great touch to see kind of that dynamic kind of brought back into the fold here. Yeah, and so making him have that personal connection to Miles, I thought was a great little flourish as well, that I appreciated. And yeah, otherwise like he is just kind of like mindless big bad broody, like he's the big guy to fight and punch and whatnot. I do appreciate that like they use that to introduce his the Venom Strike ability, like that we get the abilities that Miles is known for introduced in this game, and the ways that they're introduced, Venom Strike being there to overcome the odds against Rhino. And then the camouflage one being in kind of the next set piece of the game, because we have that opening set piece. And I appreciate that there was a trophy for like plowing through things in the in the mall, which I didn't get the first time around because I was like, I'm gonna try and like steer him away from this stuff. And so when I saw the trophy list like later in the game and saw that, I was like, oh damn it. Well, I need to do the New Game Plus run anyway, so I'll just get it then. But yeah,
I was trying to avoid stuff and I got it on accident. Like, I didn't even realize how I had run into so much shit.
You were just really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, then the next big set piece we get was the bridge one, which again, like there are elements that I get. Of course, they have to kind of sell these games, so like that sequence being shown off very prominently featured in one of their trailers or their gameplay sequences. I did appreciate the misdirect though, because in the gameplay that we'd seen on it, it was Miles in the suit, in his suit, and I appreciate that. Like, oh, in the actual gameplay, he's still wearing the janky original Spider-Man suit, and this is what basically screws that suit up, so he needs to go make his own. But I appreciate that, like how camouflage here is introduced as well, of like the Roxxon guys are just going to execute him in front of civilians who are like pulling out their phones. They're just
I thought that
ready
moment
to
was
kill
like
him.
really powerful.
Yeah, it was really dark and really powerful, especially after he is like gone through kind of the greatest hits of Spidey saving things on a bridge falling apart, of like him holding the bridge together, a la like the boat from Spider-Man Homecoming, and then like saving the bus and pulling people together and all that fun stuff. So yeah, him like basically like his life being so in threat that he disappears. I thought that was a great pull, and he doesn't even realize what's going on. They just like suddenly don't see him, and he doesn't catch that they don't see him until like he looks and can't see himself either. So yeah, I love that, and then I love that we get that hype sequence of him and Genki building out the new suit, which was a ton of fun. Yeah.
I also,
Go ahead.
going off of that sequence of them building the suit, I love like you can see Miles's room transform throughout the game. Like it just becomes more Miles.
Yeah.
Like they're like, because when the first time you see it, it's totally like they've just moved in and he's not done unpacking yet. But then like by the end of the game, there's like a beat making station and there's like a nicer TV, and then he has this whole like computer station where they're working on like Spider-Man stuff. And I thought that was just like a cool thing, like more again, like more attention to detail is like it's just like he has like the Spider-Man making station, the beat making station, like, and I was like, oh, this is really like Miles's room. Like I thought that was cool. Like you can go and just interact with all that different stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I loved kind of going back to the house and kind of getting to check in on that stuff. I love the idea that they've moved to Harlem into like his abuela's kind of old place. And so, yeah, it does feel, he obviously like the whole arc of the game is him kind of finding his home there in Harlem. And so you get that kind of at the beginning, like he clearly doesn't feel like fit in. He like it isn't lived in. Even in his mom's room, like there's still boxes everywhere and stuff that you have to go through for like the music that you're gonna put on the turntable and stuff. But yeah, kind of coming back there throughout, getting to kind of check in on the progress of the house, yeah, is a great little touch. I also love that like so often there, Genki is just kind of like working on his video game as just kind of like a side little thing that like, and I love that is like a little thing he's doing. Like I love Genki has his video game and Rio Morales has her congressional or her city council run, to just kind of like flesh out those characters as like they have, you know, goals and dreams of their own, that they're not just there to be supportive Miles. I love that as kind of defining traits for both those characters, especially because like just getting to hear like it's like I kind of almost like in the same way that the Spider-Man Christmas album was released as like a tie-in to Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. I kind of want them to release this mobile game that Genki was working on as like a fun little like, hey, here's an Easter egg that, you know, we actually made this game, you know, whatever that is. But yeah, it was just a fun little thing. Like him like trying to patch bugs and fix it out throughout the game was a fun little like flourish for that character as well. Any other, you know, cute little character moments or anything like that you want to give some love to, give some shout outs to?
I really liked the moment where I think you kind of do it twice, where you kind of like pick music to put on and like play something, and like I like just being able to like flip through the records and pick something to put on. Or I know you at least do it once with the Christmas party, and I think you do it again at some point,
That
or you
was
have the option to at least.
that was the only time I remember doing it, was the Christmas party. But there might be another option in there somewhere that I just missed.
I think it might be optional the next time, because I think it's just when you're in the house. Like I think you can just put music on at some point, and I think
Okay.
I've stopped because I think I put a different record on, but I might be wrong. But I thought that was like a really cool thing. I like just being able to stop and like you have the different options of what you can listen to, and there's like kind of different music that actually plays for all those. Like I thought that was super cool.
Hmm.
And then another thing I thought I really liked was I didn't notice it until the second time I played. They kind of call it out at the dinner party where Finn she rings the doorbell, and then the mom's like, "Oh, that doorbell hasn't worked in years," and so it's like Finn fixed the doorbell. But I didn't notice like when they actually show her for the first time, she's actually like tinkering with the doorbell like outside the door, and I was like, "Wow!" From the get go, they're literally like, "Yeah, she's like the tinkerer. Like
Yeah.
she's literally tinkering with something the first time you see her."
Yeah.
And I was just like, I just thought that was like a cool extra thing I noticed like the second time through. Even though they kind of call it out the first time, like, but when you have all that extra backstory behind it, I thought it was like a cool little thing.
Yeah. Agreed. I want to give a little love to I feel bad because I just don't remember her name, but the deaf kind of like side character, and the fact that
Mm-hmm.
Miles knows ASL and
Mm-hmm.
speaks to her. Like I thought that was a great like a lovely little accessibility kind of nod to this character. And I love that like again, she's the one that gives you the scarf. She's the one that at the end, you know, when your, you know, mask is off, she's the one that grabs the mask and like gives it over so that, you know, Miles can kind of hide his face again. So I loved her as like a little side character, and I look forward to kind of seeing, you know, where her story takes her in kind of the next game. I also loved was it Maria? I don't remember the character's name, but the
Gloria,
Gloria, yeah,
the
who you
yeah,
save in the first game, who's now working at
yeah,
Feast in this game, and kind of like getting to check in and see her. That was like a lovely. Obviously, like she has a relationship more with Peter than Miles necessarily, but Miles, the fact that he has been volunteering at Feast now for a year plus, obviously they know each other really well. So I loved getting to kind of see her arc grow as well. What did you think of the podcasts in this one? Because in addition now to JJ Jameson's show, you also have the Danicast, kind of as basically acting as a contrast. I love also the explanation for it of like it's just pre-wired into the suit that Peter gives Miles, and
hmm
Miles is like, why does he have like this guy hates us? Why does he have it in like? Why do we get notified when there's a new upload? But yeah, what did you think of those?
I love those. Like I loved it in the 2018 Spider-Man 2, and I love it again here. And like you said, like I love how it gets introduced when he's just like, man, Peter's crazy, and like I love that he doesn't turn it off though. Like
Yeah.
he leaves it on for Jay Jonah, and then he looks for like another podcast to subscribe to, and that's when he finds like the Danicast. And I thought that one was funny too because I love like even like it is kind of the juxtaposition of like the two back and forth, but I did love like her sign off. One of her, the one I can always remember is that she's like, you get a free credit report twice a year, so make sure you use it. Like she's trying to like help people
Yeah.
and like give good advice, and then Jonah's just like raving and yelling about dumb stuff. And I really loved their debate too. Like their debate killed me,
Hmm.
especially like because Jonah like forces her to debate him. And then immediately in the debate, Jonah interrupts her in her intro, and then is like, "Why am I even here? Why? Who? It's not good to destroy a child. Who thought of this?" He's just immediately screaming at everybody and leaves.
Yeah.
And she's just like, "Thank you, Jonah."
Yeah. I loved her. I loved all of her like little like life hacks that she kind of signs off every episode with. Like each one of those came up and was just like, yeah, that is a good idea. Good point there, Danica. I also love, this is another thing that I caught the second time around, because in the game, like, you never really like interact with her in person. It's always just like voice in the headset. I do appreciate that, like, she comes in and kind of helps with one of the, I think, base mission kind of things. Like, she's, the voice on the in the chair, alongside Genki on one of those. But in the opening sequence, you can see her like leaving the bodega at one point.
Mm.
So she is like there in Harlem, kind of alongside him and everything. So I appreciate that, like, because you can just see her very like noticeable purple, root, or not roots. The opposite of roots. You can see that in the design there. So yeah, that was a lovely little like, oh, hey, there's Danica, cool. That you might not catch the first time around. Really, all of the kind of characters that you get to know throughout that the game, by
Mm.
helping them and kind of doing their little side missions, are there in the opening sequence of Miles kind of walking through town. Obviously, like the mural people, as one. But yeah, it was, like, I love just catching things like that I didn't catch necessarily the first time around. Any other scenes worth highlighting or giving some love to, giving a shout out to?
Just kind of is like in a general, like I did really like that cast of characters you're talking about, kind of the ones you get in the opening scene, and then you kind of get that same ending scene, kind of that like the bookend of like him kind of going down the street and saying hey to everybody.
Hmm.
And I especially like the ending scene about how like everybody knows, but they're just like all supportive of him, and then they're like they put up the mural of him,
Yeah.
and like there's just you get all those like really cool moments, and like I really by the end I really like did like this like cast of characters, and you feel like this like neighborhood, and you're like, yeah, this is our neighborhood, this is our like we're together in this and we're our family, because that's what also Miles like says to her, or someone I think at some point, because they're like, oh yeah, like this is like my neighborhood, like we never thought I'd have a Spider-Man like in my neighborhood, and then he's like, this is like my neighborhood too.
Yeah.
Like so I like that they're all like in it together, and I like that, like I just like the way they play with that a lot, and the kind of the way, and then kind of like you said too, going back when you replay it, it's like that first scene hits differently because like you recognize all these people, and like even though they don't know Miles, it's like you know where this is going to end up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the Spider-Man 2 bus moment there at the end of the game, where like
mhm,
all these people, like, that you have, if you play it like we probably did, of like you've done all of their side missions and everything, so like all these people appreciate and the all the help that you've done for them and their community, and so immediately, like, when the press starts showing up, they kind of like form the blockade, and they're like, he's our Spider-Man, like,
yeah,
he's, you don't get to see, like, yeah, we maybe know who he is now, but like we're gonna keep his secret because he's doing good stuff for our community, he's our guy. So I love that little, that sequence. And that was one where, it did, admittedly, like, the suits, I kind of gave some praise earlier to how they were animated. They're not all animated great for that end sequence. Really, that end sequence is designed to be wearing the classic suit, because it's only when you're wearing the classic suit that like the suit is really like torn to shreds and beat up, and you kind of like, you can see how like because they mention like he's so young and whatnot, and you see like how young this kid is, kind of through the bloody tattered remnants of that suit in that sequence that I didn't catch the first time around when I was wearing the Miles 2020 suit with the Daft Punk helmet and stuff like that. Um,
And he's like, "Here, you need your mask, Miles," and he just has
He's
the
like,
perfect
all right,
Daft
yep,
Punk
I'm just
helmet
gonna
on already. Like,
well, he does still put the helmet on,
okay,
but it
okay.
was like, yeah, it like the helmet is just fully in like intact and whatnot. And he just kind of like puts it on his head and all that stuff. But yeah, it was like it's more the jacket and stuff is just fully fine. There's no problems there and that kind of stuff. But still, like I that's a minor grievance for everything else that's going into this. And I really enjoyed that kind of stuff. One thing I want to give some special love to is the post game mission that you get of
Hmm.
collecting postcards, and this was another thing. Like it was almost spoiled for me because like I was like I have not seen these postcard collectibles anywhere in this game. Like what is the deal with that? So I did like a quick Google search and saw like postcards are a post game collectible. I was like, okay, I'm not going to read any more on that. And I loved that whole sequence as like
Hmm.
like it was like a weird emotional catharsis that I didn't realize I needed from that game because like you get like one brief moment in the flashback where Miles is talking to his dad, like when you guys like are at the aquarium or the science center or whatever. Like there's that like brief moment, and I was like, oh, that's like cool, a little nod to the dad there. But then getting that
And
whole yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I feel bad because I feel bad because he like brushes him off too because
Hmm.
he's like it's totally that like
Yeah,
father son relationship or whatever where he's like be careful Miles and he's like okay dad what and like hangs up and gets off the phone but I'm like and it's totally that thing like you feel bad about in hindsight right where he's
yeah.
like damn I wish like I was like more talkative or whatever like I thought that was just something I took away from like that interaction.
Yeah. Just also as a quick little tangent, I loved the Peter and Otto moment in that flashback
Yeah.
too, and I definitely just kind of like hung around and like just kind of like listened to the whole conversation they have over that thing, and then like when Peter goes to leave, I tried to follow him, and it's like, nope, you get redirected back out at some point. But yeah, like that
I
was
I
a little like cute nod. Yeah, go ahead.
I love that moment too, but because they changed the face, it totally had that weird moment for me the first time I played it where like he bumps into him and then I knew that was somebody, but it took me a second to click like who it was, and then I was like, oh, it's Peter, and then I was like, oh, it's Otto. I was like, it made sense, but there was totally like that moment where I was like, this is they want this to be somebody, but who is this? Like,
Well, it
or like like the way they frame it, I'm like, this is somebody, but like, who is this?
yeah, I mean that's a good question. I guess that I hadn't even thought about because I is did they change Peter's face in the PS4 Miles as well?
Yeah. Like
Oh,
the
okay.
Peter in Miles Morales is the new Peter.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not the old Peter. And it was weird because like I haven't played the remaster or anything, so of course like I'm when I think of Peter, I think of the 2018 Peter.
Yeah.
So the first time you see him without the mask anyways, I was like, "Oh, right, they changed the face," and that was weird. But then again, like you never see him without the mask again until hours and hours later at this flashback. And again, I was like, it took a second where I was like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "Oh, it's Peter. It's Peter."
Gotcha.
But yeah, like it's the new Peter.
Okay, that's interesting because I thought I just assumed that like because they made such a big deal about like this is the PS5 Peter, this is the new Peter. So I assumed that like oh okay that's like that's going to be who's in Miles on PS5 as well as the remaster. But I guess for some reason I just assumed that they would have kept old Peter in the PS4 version of Miles as well. But I guess also that doesn't make any sense. Why like why would you build this game from the ground up if you know you're going to do this and put the old Peter's face in there? So yeah, that's weird. Then yeah, if you played this game on PS4 after the 2018, yeah, I guess that's odd. I like the new face didn't throw me even in this game. It didn't really like I was like I whatever. I was used to it because I'd seen it enough on the internet that I was like okay that's Peter's new face, cool. But yeah, I love that little thing. But then going back to the post game postcards thing, this like scavenger hunt that Jefferson had made before he died for Miles's I think his birthday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was just like a lovely like I'm like, okay, like if he didn't have Spider-Man powers, this would have taken like a week to do to go to all these places. And also, I don't know if he could get to all these places.
Because
Um,
one of them's on like the top of a skyscraper or
yeah,
something. And you're
like
like, how
yeah,
did
it's
Jefferson even get up here in the first place?
yeah. I mean, it was the top of the Empire State Building, so like and in a like public facing part of the Empire State Building. But yeah, it was weird. Um, this also is a good time to like. I didn't even catch this in the game, but the Chrysler Building is not in Miles Morales,
Hmm.
and there was like a news story. Basically, they didn't get the rights. Like the building basically has locked down the rights on putting that like in media like this. I was like, those those are weird things when places are like, no, you can't use our very iconic part of the Manhattan skyline, but it is still in 2018 Spider-Man, including the
Yeah.
remaster of it. So it's like weird, whatever. It's just kind of like a nondescript building now. I didn't catch it in Miles Morales until I saw like a news story about it after the fact. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I didn't recognize or I didn't like remember going up to that. But like you also spend so much of the game up in the north part of the map in Harlem that I was like, I was barely in the like downtown and financial district, so maybe I just missed it. But yeah, going to each of those little things and getting those like lovely heartfelt messages from the dad, you know, after the great like that, it definitely like just tugs at your heartstrings, and I loved that as an epilogue for this game. Like the action and everything has been so fun, and it also you know hits because you know Miles is struggling in the aftermath of Finn dying as well, and there's even that moment like he when he talks to his mom about it, and she's like it's okay that you're feeling a lot of complicated feelings right now. Like she, you know, she did some bad things, but she at the end of the day also did some good things for you. So, you know, you can't like you take the good and you take the bad kind of thing. I love that they had that little dynamic. But then also just getting this whole sequence with kind of a you know from the grave Jefferson Davis was a lovely little touch that was like yeah, it was just a very nice, heartfelt thing that, admittedly, like they can only do it once. Really, like he can't have like you know years of backdated scavenger hunts for Miles to go through. But getting to see Miles kind of appreciate his dad, it echoed the side stuff with Aaron as well, with Uncle Aaron,
Hmm.
in a nice way. In that like you for his side missions, you go to all these places that you know were important to him, or and specifically him and Miles' dad. So like it played as a nice little echo of that whole sequence. I thought, and I really love that. That was probably I mean I would say it's easily my favorite side quest in the game, as especially as like it's the one that stood out the most because this game being a lighter experience doesn't have you know oh this side quest leads you to like this new villain or something like that in the way that
Yeah.
2018 Spider-Man did. It was just like a lot of the side quests in this were like oh you're going and doing something for a couple you know nondescript people on the map, cool, okay, and then you're done. But that side quest definitely like had emotional resonance to it that I appreciated. Do you have any particular thoughts on it to add?
I completely agree with all that, and kind of what you said there as well was kind of one of my main takeaways is that like I thought it was a good balance between like the Aaron side quest with like the kind of listening because you when you do his side quest or like the Prowler side quest, you get to hear about like his side of the story and kind of like from his perspective, and then when you're listening to the dad and kind of the postcard side quest, he talks about a lot, but he does kind of touch on some of those same moments and some of those same like kind of story beats. But I like getting to hear like his perspective because I think even in the like in the Prowler storyline, he says like, "Yeah, I told your dad I was gonna stop being the Prowler, but like I was lying," and he was like, "But he believed me." He's like, "At least or he didn't say anything." And then in the dad's side, he's like, "Yeah, I don't believe him, but like, what can I do?" Like he's like I kind of like hearing like the two different sides of it, and then Miles kind of gets that to hear both too. And then it also like it hit really hard for me listening to the Jefferson Davis part of it when he because he called refers to Finn as his sister and
Mm-hmm.
he's like, "Oh, you got your sister, and like, you guys are gonna take care of each other." And I was just like, "Oh my god!" Like, it's just so sad. Like, but in like in a good way. Like, it is like a super emotional like side quest. But I definitely like. I think that's a really good part of the game.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like the fact that that they save it for after the game. I thought is a great touch. Uh, I mean, largely because you get that emotional kind of gut punch of this dead person telling you about your lovely relationship with this other dead person. Now it's like it just like hits harder that Miles has felt this loss as well. But like just a great way to cap off your time with that game, especially if at like up to that point you've done everything else and you finish the game. It's like, okay, well, I have cleared the map. What do I have to do? Oh, I've got a new thing to do, a new mission to do. Okay, let me see what this is. And so I love that a little bit. I also love the the fact that Rio kind of figures out who you are throughout this
Yeah.
in this game. So like, I mean, like Miles' secret identity is kind of like shattered from really anybody who like is super close to him. Obviously, Genki knows who he is from the beginning of the game, and then Uncle Aaron, and now his mom. So everybody in his like circle knows who he is. But again, like he doesn't really have to worry about like the big bads in the way that Peter does. So he's
Yeah.
probably still fine as a result of that. It'll be interesting to see kind of where they go in the next game, what they do with those relationships, especially because like you're gonna have the mom being like worried about her son probably
Yeah.
out there in endangering his own life all the time. But still, I mean, like Aunt May clearly knew who Peter was too at the end, so it's lovely stuff there.
I,
What do you think about? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I like prefer it that way a lot of the time. I think like at least for my Spider-Man, like when they don't always play with that, because I know a lot of it is like trying to hide the secret identity, and I obviously understand why he tries to hide that because it's obviously like endangering anybody who does know, or like anyone who's close to him. But I like the when it's just like the universe where it's like people know, like Mary Jane knows, or like Aunt May knows, or same thing where it's like Rhea knows, Genki knows, and even some other people know. Like I like when I like when that's not where like a lot of the drama comes from is like hiding the identity. I like when it's like because people know. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's like that's where it comes from. Because same thing, yeah, like you said, like now she's going to be terrified and worried for him like nonstop. And I think like they're going to probably do a lot with that going forward. And it's the same thing where I like where Aunt May knew she just never said anything,
Yeah.
and she was worried the whole time too. But like that's a great little like thing they did there. And I think, and to me that's very Aunt May. I feel like I don't know a way where Aunt May would have to know, like even if she just figured it out, but that's just my take on that. But that's something I like this, and I like the way the scene they reveal it, where he's like bleeding in the hallway, and she's like, oh, and she like says whatever to him, and he's like, I have something I need to tell you, and he's just like wearing this destroyed suit, and he's like bleeding, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, yeah, like I think that's a good moment, and she just like, of course, like takes care of him.
Yeah. On the gameplay side of things, was there anything that really jumped out to you in terms of like either like steps up from the last game or things that you were missing from the last game?
I miss some of the gadgets from the last game. I get why Miles like doesn't have them because obviously he's newer, he's not as experienced, and obviously like Peter's been doing it for much longer. And you could even argue that Peter has like much more experience with tech and like working in a lab and even has access to better stuff. And I like that Miles is still able to make some of his own gadgets for the story, but I was definitely like missing some of the things that Peter had, or just the fact that Peter had like more gadgets, because the gadgets that Miles have, like I didn't really find myself using too often. Like the remote mines were pretty helpful, but like the hologram guys, I didn't think was like really super helpful at any point.
Yeah, I almost never use
Like
those things.
yeah, and like a lot of his like abilities or a lot of his gadgets, I just never found myself using that often. But like, so I did on the one hand I did miss that, but I think obviously they sacrificed some of that in order to do more time with like the Venom powers, or even just add that in. And I love the Venom powers. Like, my first playthrough, I feel like I played it too much like 2018 Spider-Man, where I was just like fighting like normal, and I would use like a venom strike or something like when I had to, or when I was getting like overwhelmed or the situation called for it. But by the end of like the new game plus, once I was really upgraded and had everything, I was like chaining the venom abilities together, and you can do these like really awesome combos and like have these really beautiful sequences where you can like launch 5 people into the air, and you could grab a guy out of the air and slam him into the ground and throw him into another group of people, and then you could like chase after him and do like another attack. Like I really liked all the Venom stuff by the end. And then once I did all the training holograms, I liked that like they give you new like traversal options, kind of like
Hmm.
it totally reminded me of Infamous, where
Yeah.
I'm just flying through the city and then you get like that speed boost, or like you get like the dash and the jump or whatever. Like all I waited that I waited way too late till after like the story to do the training stuff, and that
Okay.
was one of the ones where I was like I did everything. Like it was one of those ones where I'm like, it's like, hey, the final mission, and I'm like, okay, I better go do all the side stuff I have left. So I saved all the training for last. And by the end, I was like, oh, now I have all this cool new shit I could really use. And
Yeah.
that's why New Game Plus was great. So
Yeah.
New Game Plus, I was super powerful and barely got touched the whole time.
Yeah, that was another thing going back both to this game and the 2018 remastered version. Like I saw pretty quickly of like, oh yeah, if you like each of those training challenges unlocks a new ability, and in most cases it was like something that you could do in the 2018 version. So I was like, okay, I definitely want like to do those. So I unlocked them all pretty early on. And in both games, I just found myself loving and going back to that like the Sunset Overdrive energy
Hmm.
of like in Sunset Overdrive on Xbox, there was I want to say an achievement for like go from like one end of the map to the other without ever touching the ground. And I found myself just for the hell of it trying to do that in Spider-Man, of like and not like and some of it was just like I want to try and see how far I can get without even swinging, because I would
Hmm.
do like the zip dash, and then like yeah, venom dash or something like that, and have a like I just had so much fun just moving around the city with Miles's abilities, and yeah, I love the venom abilities that do kind of add more of a you can take out multiple guys at once with these abilities as opposed to yeah 20 like my kind of strategy in 2018 is I punch a guy up into the air and then I jump up and like knock him out, and then once he's out I like lift somebody else up and do the same kind of thing, and I can usually get like three or four guys in like one mid-air combo thing. And so I started doing a lot of that with Miles here, and it wasn't until I started really playing around with those venom abilities that I was like, oh okay, like there are other here's another approach I can try and take with it, and yeah, having some fun with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I appreciated the limited gadget set so I could focus on those the venom abilities, and I really loved the camouflage ability in
Yeah.
particular because I'm oftentimes very bad at stealth in games, and so like I will try and do stealth, and then when I inevitably screw up, I'm like, well, okay, I guess no more stealth for this run because these guys now know where I am. I loved that in like the stealth sections and like the the boss not the boss areas like the warehouses and stuff like that kind of thing in this game, where it is like okay do the first chunk of this at least as stealth or you'll just start getting the waves of enemies. I loved doing those, and I loved that like oh if you do kind of fall out of stealth you can pop on your camouflage, dart away, and then like be hidden again and kind of like start fresh, without oh okay now I just need to try and like rack up the combos and beat these guys up. So I loved that it gave me that approach and let me kind of be like oh I screwed up but I'm not being punished for the rest of this engagement because I screwed up and fell out of or I didn't catch a guy or something like that. So yeah, I really appreciated that. And then I also appreciated the adjustment to how crimes are handled in the gameplay on this one.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, I mean, there are still like random crimes that happen on the streets, but it like putting it into that like friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app where you could just kind of like, pick and choose what crimes you wanted to do. I thought was a much, especially going back and playing the remaster. I was like, God, I miss that app. So
Yeah.
I look very forward to that moving forward into Spider-Man 2, so we don't have to deal with those random street crimes again, hopefully, because I thought that was just a great way to incorporate that like the feedback of like yeah you had gang crimes, you had the demon crimes, you had the Sable crimes in the first game, kind of like over and over and over again that you were having to do, and I appreciated that it was very much streamlined for this game. Uh,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there, and because I'm sure you probably had a similar thing, but I got down to the point where I had all of the optional objectives for the crimes done, except for one on one particular crime. It was the car stopping without getting hurt. That was the last one I needed to
mhm.
do, and I was like, God, am I gonna have to swing around this entire city until I find a car being carjacked? And then I was able to be like, I was like, because I don't think you can just spawn crimes. And I opened the app, and I was like, you can, like, you can just say like, I want to do this crime, and
Yep.
it'll appear somewhere. And I was like, genius, like, yeah, like you're like that's a great addition, and that's something I hope they never get rid of. I hope they just improve and build on that going forward. And yeah, and I also like that it is just also like activity tokens instead of like crime token, base token, whatever. It's like you just did an activity, so you have the activity token. Like I think it's streamlined that a little bit too.
Yeah, I imagine will like in the proper game they'll probably go back to too many different currencies. But I did appreciate that it was streamlined for this one. Yeah, like especially in the scope of this game, I found myself comparing it to like the DLC, the City That Never Sleeps stuff from Spider-Man. Like if you combine all three of those, that's probably about the same length of this game. And so I appreciated that. Yeah, like really all of that side quest stuff was streamlined to accommodate the size of the game that you're doing. And I appreciated that, yeah, since you are spending so much of the time up in the north part of the map, there aren't a ton of things you have to do down at the bottom where you're just never naturally playing. But if you do, like I especially on PS5. I don't know if it was the same case for you on PS4, but I love just how quickly it loaded.
Mm.
So like I could, if I did want to fast travel, down to the under the other end of the map, I was there in 3 seconds instead of swinging all the way down. And admittedly, swinging still great, feels a ton of fun. I love that Miles has a different like trick move set, and he
Yeah,
could,
yeah,
he's much more. He has it's there's like a lovely juxtaposition in when he's just swinging normally, he looks a lot more clumsy, a lot like he's clearly a lot newer to this than 2018 Peter is. But but the fact that he has more fun with it, more flourishes when you're doing tricks and combos and stuff like that, made it like it's a fun difference between those two styles. But I also loved that, like, yeah, I could just fast travel and be on the other side of the map in, seconds, because of the power of the system and because the game was optimized for that. I think you said that like loading was incredibly fast on the PS4 Pro as well, too, right?
yeah, yeah. It is. It's not as fast as the PS5 because it's not like instant, but it is still incredible because there's a lot of times where there's no load times where you think there would be because like there's sometimes you're transitioning from like outside into inside or like and then there's the one time where you have to like run up this really long hallway.
Oh, and I lost Frank again. I thought I might lose Frank there because I heard him start getting crackly. I also hate that like the when I lose Frank, my face just goes right into the middle of the pixel glasses on the video version of the podcast. So uh, I'm just like, oh, okay, now I gotta like move my head from side to side. Welcome back, Frank.
Sorry.
No, no problem. So yeah, you were saying the loading. You don't expect when it's happening or anything like that. I felt like especially going from like inside to outside, there were a lot of places where I'm like, okay, I'm crawling through vents. That's clearly like masking,
Yeah.
getting ready to go back outside. But it's still like it super seamless when you have those transitions. So I love that element as well. Um,
Because
yeah,
that's where like there was definitely like there's that one where you run up like this really long hallway and that's totally where I was like okay like I have to springboard up this hallway and then out of a vent and I'm like that's where you're like loading the city in. But the one that got me is you literally just like I saw this as like a thing of people being like, look how fast the PS5 is because he just grabs the vent with his webs and launches out of the building and he's in the city already.
yeah,
And then I was like, wow, that's incredible. And then it's exactly the same on PS4.
yeah,
You you web the thing and you go through the vent and you're just in the city. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like it. I guess that like, but again, like it is super optimized. Like because the load times whenever you die or if I are trying to fast travel are just super fast. Even trying to get into the game, especially compared to the other game I'm playing, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that has like 45-minute load times whenever I'm trying to do anything.
yeah.
Um, like Assassin's Creed has always had that problem, so I'm just used to it. But it's like, yeah, but like as comparing it to Spider-Man, Spider-Man's just like super fast, and I know like they must have like figured out how to optimize it perfectly. Except for the only point is that at the end of the game there's like the snowstorm level, and this is something I had mentioned to you before too. Of like that just caused my game to run at a crawl,
Hmm.
and it just like it would like freeze me every couple like frames while I was trying to fight and swing around. And once I got out past that level, everything was fine again. And I was like, man, why like I what happened there? And on New Game Plus, didn't have an issue. I don't know what happened.
Hmm.
Like I did that whole level. I was expecting it to just run like crap again. Maybe they patched it in between then, but I was like, I don't know, like it ran fine the second time through. So like I think the game's really optimized.
Yeah, I definitely found on kind of the performance side of things there. I definitely found the game even on PS5 like chugging a little bit, like especially near the end of like if I've been playing the game for 8 hours or something like that, it's like enough things have piled up on the back end that it's like it's taxing the system a little bit. So I definitely ran into some issues there, and specifically, I mentioned this I think on one of the other podcasts when I tried to switch from the performance mode to the graphical mode or whatever. When I tried to switch to the 60 FPS on my PS5, like it was like, hey, we don't want to do that, and so like it like got super chuggy and stuff, and it ended up kind of crashing my PS5 at one point. So I had to like I ended up losing like an hour of gameplay or something like that. But then I didn't really run into that issue again, and especially on like Spider-Man Remastered, I played that whole thing in 60 FPS on the remaster and had a great time there. So, yeah, I think it's just like it's launch window of the game kind of like woes, and then also launch of the hardware kind of woes a little bit on my end of things. But overall, like those were such a small portion of kind of my issues with the game that like yeah barely even worth mentioning for me. Just a good all around fun game. So the last thing I want to dive into with you a little bit is kind of the credits tease that we get, much like 2018 Spider-Man. We kind of like go back to the Osborn penthouse and get to see. This time we're basically in the tank from Harry's perspective. It seems, as Osborn is out there, trying to get him healed up with Dr. Connors, like at the AKA the Lizard, basically they're like helping out. And I didn't like in the chronology of things. I'm like, has he turned into the Lizard at this point? Because Osborn clearly hasn't become the Green Goblin yet.
Mm.
And it was like going back through 2018. One of the collectibles that you can find basically is like, yeah, like Connors turned into Lizard. Peter was able to like create something that turned him back, but he says like he has a comment that says like, but it didn't stick. But then we see Dr. Connors like clearly in human form, so it seems like he is able to kind of like switch between the two, or maybe manage his lizard abilities or something. Or maybe they'll just ultimately be like, hey, we're gonna make that collectible you found non-canon because we decided we wanted to tell a story with the lizard in Spider-Man 2. But what did you think of kind of the things that are teased in there, as well as like what do you want to see from the next Spider-Man game?
I thought it was great. I really didn't expect that. Another thing, I just like hadn't really put much thought into it, and I so when you get to the end of the credits and like the scene starts playing, I was immediately like blown away and like really excited for like what we're gonna get, and then especially like as it plays out, as you mentioned, it's not just Harry and like in kind of being taken over by the symbiote. It's also Dr. Connors and kind of being the Lizard, and then of course there's even the fact that like we can still get the Green Osborn or the Green Goblin at some point from Osborn, and like that's like it's so incredibly exciting to me to just like see these characters are like interacting with each other, even if we don't get that for like a really long time. And I totally think they're obviously building towards like I'm assuming the symbiote's going to be like a huge factor of like I assumed it was going to be a huge factor of the next game, but now I wonder if that might even be like game three or something. Like I wonder how far they might keep like this is like a Thanos thing, right? Like at
Yeah,
the end of the credits, like I wonder how long they'll keep like moving the symbiote along, or if they'll immediately be like, hey, this is a problem. Probably they will do that because I guess the big part of that scene is he's telling Connors to take him out of the tank.
yeah.
So that's probably I think we're probably going to get a lot of really cool stuff with those three. I'm not sure if they'll ever even do maybe the Green Goblin, but I could see them doing it where like Harry becomes the symbiote, you take Harry, and then you take Harry down. While you're taking Harry down, you also have to dismantle the lizard at kind of the same point, or kind of like in tandem, probably working like with Miles, like to take them down. And then because of the loss of his son and kind of even Dr. Connors and everyone else you take down, I could totally see that pushing Norman into like Green Goblin or going crazy, or even another thing too of like he's looking for another antidote for Harry, so maybe he runs some tests on himself and he becomes like Goblin.
Yeah, they do set up some teases of the Green Goblin. Like he has the pumpkin grenades basically ready to go. They've been like in R&D, and then he also has like the masks basically design the mask that like MJ puts on to show like the structural weakness is basically the Green Goblin mask, just like not with a coat of paint or whatever. So like they definitely set up the teases that he's probably pretty much baked and ready to go. I love the idea, the theory that that we'll get kind of like Harry as the symbiote in the next game, and then like Peter, breaks him and frees him from it, but then gets infected by the symbiote himself, and Miles has to step in. And now that you are kind of like set up, I like the idea of the next guy being like, okay, you're going to play part of the game as Peter, but then like at some point Peter's going to start to turn and you're going to switch over and you're going to be Miles, and you're going to have to kind of like, fight Peter and kind of like bring him back to the light kind of thing. One of the things that I would really love to see, and I teased this out, or I tweeted this out shortly after finishing this game, is in kind of conjunction with the Insomniac version of things versus like the Spider-Verse version of things. Or Gwen Stacy has not yet been introduced. I think she's maybe like mentioned or in like one of the collectibles. I think there's like she signed a card or something of Peter or something. Like she's in this universe somewhere, I think. But I would love to see her get introduced and also bitten somewhere along the lines. And then what I really want is like we get a Spider-Gwen in the same way that we got a Miles Morales game, 2 years down the line. So I think like 2 years from now, we'll get Spider-Man 2, and then, another 2 years down from there, we'll get a Spider-Gwen game. I would love to see that. And then, that leads to Spider-Man 3, where all three of them are teaming up, and it is like Spider-Man 3 with the three of them or something like that. That's kind of like my dream scenario at this point, would be like bringing all that together. And then, I don't know, like let's cast Ashley Johnson as Spider-Gwen or something like that. We've already got Laura Bailey in there as MJ, so it seems like it makes sense. But yeah, I loved, I just love kind of the whatever may come. I love the universe that Insomniac's building. I love clearly the love they have for these characters. I love that this is the origin Spider-Man game that we didn't get, in 2018, because Peter has been doing it for 8 years at that point. So like getting to see kind of Miles's origin here really was a lot of fun. I also want to give some love to the Stan Lee Easter egg that they put in the game. It is tied to a trophy. And because like the trophy is basically like best fries in town or something like that. And it's basically like find the restaurant that Stan Lee's character Mick had from the first game, and did his little Easter egg, and they've built a giant statue in honor of him, and clearly like breaking the fourth wall and recognizing that this is Stan Lee, they didn't make this statue to a fry cook. But I love that, even if it meant I had to just like because I didn't know where that was, and I didn't want to look up.
It was really hard to find.
I did not want to look up a guide to like just figure out where this was. So I just like went up and down the streets of like, it's in the Upper East Side basically is what the trophy says or something. So I was like, yeah, best fries on the Upper East Side. So I just kind of like went up and down each street until I finally found it. And then I was like, oh, that is like, cause I didn't know what it was going to be. So I was just looking for Mick's place. And then like when you get there, it is like a giant bronze statue of Stan Lee. I was like, okay, that's beautiful. I love that. That was a great little touch. I also always have a hard time finding the graves that you have to find in these games, because like in 2018 it was like go find Uncle Ben's grave. which you can do very easily at the end of the game, but I didn't realize that. But then for this one, it was like, okay, find Jefferson Davis's grave. I'm like, ah, crap. So I've just kind of like scoured the cemetery. I appreciate that, like, if you use the, the scan mode or whatever, it does highlight, that grave yellow. So I was like, okay, that made it easier to find. But it was definitely a lot of running around just being like, okay, where's this thing I'm looking for? But still, the Stanley moment in particular, I was like, that's a beautiful touch. I love that. And then getting to see him again playing the 2018 remaster was lovely as well. So yeah, I think that's going to do it. Any final thoughts that you want to share on Spider-Man Miles Morales?
I just think it's a great game, and I'm really excited to see what else we get from Insomniac in this universe, and even kind of like what we talked about for like the future games. I definitely even want to see more of these like smaller bite-sized games, because I think your pitch for sort of like the Spider Gwen game would be awesome, and I think it would be even like while I was playing it, I was like, man, this would be so cool if we could get like some of these characters that might not fit for like a huge game like on the scale of like normal Spider-Man, but like on these sort of these like smaller bite-sized experiences. I was like, it'd be so cool to get like a Black Cat game where you play as like Black Cat, or if you played as like the Prowler and you got to go do missions as the Prowler, or even if it was like a prequel thing with like young Prowler. And like, I don't know, like I think there's so many cool things you could do with these like smaller experiences, so I'm really excited to see like what else we get from Insomniac and just their little universe here.
Yeah, it's I agree. I think it's a great little universe they've put together. They've built, and I'm game for whatever they have. I'm now, obviously different teams, but I'm very excited. I was already excited, but I'm just more excited now for Ratchet and Clank on PS5 next year. And yeah, whenever we get the next batch of Spider-Man here, I'm all for it. This is such a fun iteration of this beloved character, and just getting to go hands on with it, and the fact that it just feels so fun to play. Swinging combat always feels great. I look forward to whatever we get next, and I'm really enjoying their twists on a lot of these established canon kind of characters. So yeah, I especially in the next game, I am very interested to see, because obviously, like, Norman has been, still kind of a pseudo father figure to Peter in the past, and clearly has that relationship with him. He's obviously started to also be a little like evil, given that he created this devil's breath thing out of like, trying to save his son and damn the consequences or whatever. But yeah, I'm interested to see kind of where that continues to go in the next game. And yeah, I like I can't wait to see what they do with like a Mysterio type of character in whatever form that comes. And admittedly, like, some of that is probably influenced by Far From Home and really liking what they did with Jake Gyllenhaal there. But like, Craven the Hunter, I want to see what they do with that kind of character. I want to see,
Morbius.
Morbius, sure. I want to see what they, I want to see them do something more with maybe Scorpion or something,
Mhm.
from the last game. And yeah, I'm just excited for the future of Insomniac Spider-Man.
Going off of that, where two of like kind of villains we would love to see. I had heard on one of the spoiler casts that the director was on. He had mentioned when they were trying to figure out like villains and like Easter eggs and stuff to put in, somebody on their team had yelled out "Big Wheel," and that was like, I understand nobody on the podcast understood, but that is a deep cut that hit home for me. Is that's like one of my favorite like F tier Spider-Man villains. Of He's a guy who drives a big Ferris wheel that has like arm grabber hands on it, and it's the size of a Ferris wheel, and it goes down like city streets. And he was in like two issues like in like the 80s, and he's
Hmm.
never been ever referenced ever again. And I was like, so, but that just shows me that like the people working on the game are super passionate, and if anything, like that was just something that I was happy to hear, and I would legitimately really love to see that, because I think you could do it really cool. Like, imagine trying to stop a giant Ferris wheel like going down the streets. And I think in this game it would have even made sense with the Tinkerer, if you were like the Tinkerer made this dude this giant automated like Ferris wheel that he can drive.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, they'll definitely like. if they did something like that, they will definitely make a spectacle, like a great set piece action sequence out of it. And it'll be a lot of like quick time stuff, but it'll still be a great fun time, just like the crane sequence was in 2018, just like the bridge sequence is in this one. Yeah, I think like I would love to see them get weird with it, and come up with like their iterations, their versions of like Polka Dot Man or Condiment King or something like that from from Spidey's Rogues Gallery. Because Big Wheel is not a thing I would have ever like identified. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing whatever they do next. They clearly got a team that is very passionate and loves what they're working on up there. So here's to Insomniac, and they in my eyes right now, they can do no wrong. They're just killing the game. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you, Frank, for joining me. Let's go around the metaphorical table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give some love to on the internet? Again, anything you want to give a shout out to?
I don't think so. I don't think I have anything this week.
Okay. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I kind of already did the plugs at the beginning, but keep an eye out on our YouTube page. And then also, I guess, check out this week or this month, and this is something that Frank was on too. This month we're doing on that D Plus show just a whole bunch of Christmas movies. So Frank and I sat down this last week and talked about the Santa Claus. So you can go check out our Disney Plus thoughts on that. We're also I'm looking at doing Home Alone, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Muppet Christmas Carol. So stay tuned for a fun December of that D Plus show, that December Plus show, if you will. You can find all of the stuff we're doing over at That Nerdy Site, and check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest content from us. If you liked what you heard, once again, please rate, review, like, subscribe, maybe even consider supporting us over on patreon.com/thatnerdysite. I haven't seen anybody share That Nerdy Site podcasts in their Spotify Wrapped stuff. So, I challenge, somebody out there who's listening to have listened to us. It probably hasn't been the case. But that's a goal for maybe next year, is to show up in somebody's tweet about their Wrapped stuff. But you can, again, if you can support us on Patreon, we would appreciate that as well. Patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this show. This month's early access episode is a fun one of me, Frank, Cam, and Logan all sitting down and talking about some of our forgotten gem games of this last generation. So you can hear us talking about and waxing poetic about a lot of those games from, the upper tiers of our top 10 lists that didn't quite make, the top of the top. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.